All right. Hello and welcome. My name is Elling Leon, and I'm the uh, who am I don't even know how to describe myself. I'm the coordinator of the RPM challenge. Um, and it's February already, February 4th, and it's very exciting to have February happen because it's the best month out of the year because of the RPM challenge, a challenge to record uh, music, any style, any length in the month of February. And we have about 700 people signed up worldwide right now. And it's interesting, fun to hear. Oh, I'm also hearing my own voice in my ear. But I'm joined with Sarah Harris from Lawnya. Hello, how are you, Sarah?
Hey, what's up? Sorry. Um, I'm Sarah from Lawnya. We're a music festival in St. John's, Newfoundland, and we present these workshops every year with Elling, and it's been a lot of fun. You can check out the archive of past workshops uh, on the RPM YouTube page, I think,
Yep,
uh,
that's right. Yeah, all of them are there.
which is a great resource. And then today we're also super stoked to present another one here today.
Yes, and uh, who's joined us today, Sarah?
Yes, of course. Today, we're going to be joined by Tatum Wilson, who's a sound designer and musician based in Montreal. And we're talking today specifically about Ableton Live and designing sounds for music production using that piece of software.
Making magic with Ableton.
Precisely.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Hey Tatum, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent. Um yeah, is there what's the weather like there?
It's cold. It's February, which is the worst month in Montreal, but
Right.
it's sunny outside today, which is nice.
Is it like, nose hair freezing cold? That's the thing that
Y-
part of Montreal winter is that stands out to me.
For sure. Yeah, your eyelashes aren't falling off your face just yet, but I'm sure we'll be there in no time, so.
Falling off your face. Does that happen? Really? Oh my
Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but definitely some thawing that has to be done.
Right, right.
Um,
Some like
but yeah,
whiteness. But anyway, yeah, you thanks for doing this. If what we're gonna do, Tatum's gonna do the workshop and then at the end we're gonna wait for questions at the end. But if you do have any questions, we'll just keep track of them, Sarah and I, and but just put them in the chat anywhere you are. You could be watching from Twitch, you could be watching from YouTube or on Facebook. Either of those places, we'll be paying attention, and then we'll bring him to Tatum at the end, and we'll have a little Q&A. So um, that's uh, that's it. I guess Tatum, you can take it away.
sweet. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really excited about this opportunity.
Oh, totally.
Um, I'll just quickly reintroduce myself a little bit, I suppose. I'm a producer and composer working in Montreal. I also work quite a bit in audio post production, doing sound design and mixing for film. Um, why sound design? Why is this a cool technique to learn in relation to Ableton? I think Ableton's probably the most intuitive software to start building your own sounds and, more importantly, experiment. It's built-in functionality brings a lot, so you don't necessarily need to come in with a lot of external plugins and things that you might be spending a lot of money on. Although those are great as well, but I do want to demonstrate today how just kind of understanding certain principles, we can take one sound and completely recontextualize it and use that to enhance our productions and lots of other applications as well. Um, so I guess I'll just quickly give a brief rundown of what sound design is. I guess historically it's more, or like more in like a film context, it's is commonly recognized by. But this would be like if you're working with a film, you're like creating sound effects, generating ambiances, creating atmosphere, generally trying to like build out the world or enhance a sense of immersion with what you're watching. However, nowadays it's more broadly a term that's used to just like describe contemporary music production techniques, or just like any like digital technique you'd use to like create your own sound. Um, these techniques are like really synonymous with like mixing as well, and like it could use to be describing like sound synthesis, sampling, particularly with like electronic music. But all these techniques have like a lot of relevance for like any like all genres of music. Like even if you're like a live band, you might like create like effects that you want to trigger to like introduce a song or create transitions and these sorts of things. Yeah, as well as like if you're like mixing vocals, for example, or working with a vocalist as a producer, it's all the same tools, which is what's interesting about it. So yeah, sound design can be used to like introduce like intrigue, suspense, depth, clarity, emphasis, all these sorts of like words where we try to pull out emotion out of a track that might be done more in the production process after the recording process, or even if you're starting from scratch. So for this workshop today, I'm going to be pretty much just working with audio. I'm not going to really touch MIDI too much. And I kind of want to do that to demonstrate like you don't need to have like a background in music theory or much musical knowledge at all. You really just need to know how to use your ear and understand what you're doing or move with intention when you're experimenting. So yeah, I guess I'll start with a quick like rundown of Live's interface, super fast, for anyone who hasn't ever used this software before. So in Ableton, we have, right now we're in what's called the arrangement view. This is basically like your timeline, like with any other DAW if you're using like Pro Tools or Logic or Reaper or whatever. And then we also have what's called the session view where we can launch clips. For example, if I like drag this in here, I could then like launch it as a loop or something if I was performing live. It's also a good tool to like organize your session if you don't want to have like a super messy timeline and you're working out like demos and ideas. You can always like quickly reference back and pull it out, which is always great. On the right over here, we have our audio tracks. And if we click on one, we can then add like audio effects. So like if I added like a EQ real quick to this one, we'll see it down here, and then we can just work with it. Yep. And what else do we got here? On the left here, we have the browser. So this is where you'll find all of the effects and like tools you can use to process your sound. So like here I'm in audio effects. This is where all the built-in plugins are. Plugins would be like if you use external VSTs, this is where they'd show up. And then at the top here, we have like collections, and this is just like if you wanted to like quickly color code or like add a favorite, because you always reach for that one. Like you can see on auto filter, I have under favorites and mixing, because I always grab that one. So yeah, I guess I'll stop talking in a sec and start showing you some music, but there's a few like characteristics of sounds. I think that really understanding them helps you move with like intention when you're like designing a sound. So I would like categorize these as like the color of the sound. Also, you could like refer to that as the tone. So that would be like if you're EQing a sound and cutting the mids and boosting the highs to increase the brightness, you're changing the tone or the color of it. We can work with dynamics, so that would be like compression, expansion, gating, these sorts of things that affect like the transients and the volume of it. We can work with the space, which is more like reverb and delay, and see how like distance or perceived distance of a sound, um, or like how much room it takes up in the mix. And then we can work with like pitch or modulate factors of the sound. So that would just be like transposing something up an interval or down an interval, or adding like chorus or a flanger that's sort of like modulating the pitch in subtle ways. Excuse me. And then finally, we can work with stereo image. I don't know if I'll be going into that too much today. I'll probably refer to it a couple times, but I think with Zoom, I'm not so sure if the audio output will be in stereo, so I just don't know how well those effects would even show up. But essentially, your stereo image, you'll hear a lot of people talk about working with stereo imaging in like the mastering phase of a track, but I really like to consider it also when you're working with individual components, because if you're working at the mastering stage, you're trying to like make your mix sound wider. You can run into issues pretty fast where like it doesn't translate across speakers or headphones. You can introduce like phase cancellation and these sorts of things. But essentially, if we're working with the stereo image of something, well, I guess I'll explain really quick what stereo is. It's essentially like a small delay between each speaker that like creates a phantom image in the middle. And it's like, if you're like sitting between two speakers, you hear the sound out the middle. Or headphones, you don't hear it like left ear, right ear necessarily. You hear it like kind of in the center of your head, So yeah, that's like, it's sort of like an illusion, but it's extremely recognizable in like modern production techniques as well. Often like several or all of the factors that I just kind of introduced are interrelated. Especially if you're running like a chain, like for example, if I had a filter, an EQ down here, and then I introduce like a reverb after. Obviously, going one into the next, it's going to process it in series. So you would hear like the effect of this going through the reverb, versus processing it in parallel would be like if I used bus routing or something like that. But they're also interrelated on a more like core level, where like, for example, if you compress something really aggressively, you might be introducing a lot of harmonic distortion to the sound. Or like using a reverb or delay, you might increase the like perceived width of a sound or distance. So right here I've just got a few stems that I've pulled from actually a few different productions of mine. They're each from a different song, but my goal is to kind of show how all of these could just be like completely recontextualized, completely transformed into something different, and then work together. So I love working this way because you can always constantly like remix yourself. And then I think it also, as an artist, I think it helps you build kind of your sound. When people talk about like your sonic identity or like whatever, if you're kind of like constantly referencing your own music, but then like changing it, you do kind of get this like cohesiveness or like continuity, I find, especially if you're like developing an album or something. So that's something I do a lot. It's like I just sample myself. Am I going too fast? Is this making sense for everybody?
It's great. This is awesome.
Sweet. Cool. I'll just quickly like preview each of these sounds I'm working with today so we can hear them real fast. So here I've got like a room tone that you might more traditionally use in like a sound design for film context, where maybe like the on-set recording didn't capture the room tone for whatever reason, and you need to add in another one that you recorded or found from a sound library. So that sounds like this. It just like sounds like noise, right? And then I also have, this is from another track I was working on recently, like an R&B beat. This is like a melody I made. I'll just remove this processing I was adding earlier. Yeah. And then I've got a couple of percussion loops that I'll come to later. Just like a kick and a percussion loop. So how do we make these all work together or create something new out of each one? Let's start with, it's called warping in Ableton. So if you click on a clip, like I'm clicking on my room tone here, and then you see here we have the waveform, and then we can go down here to where it says audio. If you turn on warping, what Ableton's doing is analyzing your audio file for the transients, and then it allows you to like time stretch it or change the pitch or the gain, to either like create some maybe interesting rhythmic effects, or say you're sampling a vocal from another song but you're like remixing it. You could like change the tempo so that it aligns and it doesn't sound too fast or slow. So let's hear this against the R&B thing. Right now it's just this annoying wall of noise behind my melody. So maybe I'll just start with by transposing it. So I'm going to go down to the pitch here. And then, okay, so now we're kind of in tune, right? So I pitched it down to semitones. I'll mute this for a sec. All right, so how, if I'm warping this, let's say I want to stretch it to be much longer. So I'm increasing the BPM here, and you can see the files stretching. Now, what we have here where it says beats and transients, these are like different warping algorithms you can choose from. They each have like their own characteristics. Some kind of like act more like a granular synthesizer, and some more like DJ software where it just sounds like a really like time stretched kind of artifacty sound. And then beats, it's more like if you're working, I think it's kind of designed for if you're working with drum loops and you wanted to like cut and like kind of like readjust the rhythm. But you could use it on anything. Like I'm using it on this room tone here. So I'm going to change this. I'm not sure exactly what these are called, but they're kind of like different, I think different like settings within the algorithm for how it adjusts the sound. Basically, like this is kind of the smoothest. This one sort of has this like repeating effect, and then this is kind of like more of like a gate or like a stutter effect almost. But you could think of this kind of as like your dry wet, although I don't think that's exactly what it is, but it's essentially the intensity at which the effect's being applied, right? So if I turn this down, and then I switch where it says preserve transients, if I switch this to, let's say 16th notes, it's then going to like adjust this to the grid, and the tempo of my track, which is up here. Pull the gain up a bit. And then you can hear now we kind of have this like percussive element, which is kind of getting a bit more interesting than a wall of sound from a room. So I'll unmute my loop. Yeah, so now they're kind of working together a bit. But I want to push this further, so let's start like going back to those terms I was mentioning. Like, let's start working with the color or the tone of this sound. I'll move my loop over a tiny bit too. Alright, so let's add an EQ, because I don't love this like kind of resonant, oops, wrong one. I'll do this EQ 8, so we can see our spectrum here. Now, if I'm working with changing the color of this sound, I want to like, we can see there's a lot of low end information below 100 hertz, and I don't really need that, so I'm just gonna like shelf it off real quick. Right? Make room for more bassy elements in the other sounds. And then I kind of hear this resonant frequency. Maybe I want to just kind of chill that out a bit. Right, so on, off. You can hit 0 to mute or deactivate plugins in Ableton. All right, now it's taking up a lot less space. Okay, so like let's keep pushing it further, right? So what I'll do here is I'm gonna consolidate this audio, this clip. So you can do that with Command J or Control J if you're on Windows, or you can right click and hit consolidate. And what this does is it's going to apply this kind of like processing I did down here with the pitch and the warping, and kind of like render it out so that it's destructive. So I can't like go back and unchange this unless I undo. But it's what I want. I want to like work with this percussion sound. I don't want to work with it later on as like a wall of noise necessarily. Yeah, so consolidate. And we can see this reflected in the waveform here, right? We have this kind of like choppy rhythm now. So I could keep pushing this further if I wanted, right? If I turn warp off and then adjust the pitch, it's going to like adjust the length to be repitched versus like keeping the tempo of the same. So like, let's say I just moved it down an octave, 12 semitones. Right. So yeah, that's something you can do as well. Maybe I want to add a bit of reverb to it now. So I'll go here, I'm in audio effects, and I'll go to reverb and resonance. And I'm going to use this one called hybrid reverb. I quite like this plugin. It's a newer one with Ableton 11, I think. What it is it's like a mix, like as the name implies, it's a hybrid of a convolution reverb, which is a reverb that takes an impulse response. So like if someone goes to a real space and they clap, like let's say they're in a church and they clap and it has this long echo, they record the tail of that, and then the idea is that you can like reproduce it realistically, like as if you were in that space. So you can see through here, like we got like real places, plates, chambers in large rooms. Let's do this. So I'll try a large wood room. Oh, I don't know what this is gonna sound like. Pretty cool. And then we have like, I won't go too deep into this, but we have like different features here. This side of it where it says decay, size, damping. This is all part of an algorithmic reverb. So it's like the convolution reverb going into the algorithmic reverb. So technically you're working with two reverbs, but it gives you a lot more control and kind of can add some interesting effects. Over here we have the pre-delay. So with reverb, pre-delay is like the amount of time before the reverb kicks in after the sound is played. Generally like a longer pre-delay gives the impression of a larger space. So what I like about this plugin is you could actually change it for milliseconds. So like right now it's 10 milliseconds, it's pretty standard. But I could change it to be quantized to a grid. So I'll quickly like cut this at the end here. Mute. And then let's see. And I could like make it to the rhythm of the track, or like work with like other rhythmic elements in the track. So, right. And it gets more drastic. I'm gonna put the dry wet up to 100, and then I'm gonna freeze this out. So what freezing is doing, this is a pretty much available in all DAWs. It's just like rendering the audio in place. Generally people do this to like save on plugin processing power. If you have like a big session with lots of tracks and lots of processing, you can do this to save on CPU. It's nice because it's non-destructive, which means that you can just like unfreeze it. Even though it's rendered, like you could unfreeze it later if you wanted to change things. So it's a good way to, yeah, save on a bit of space. But what I like about Ableton is, so I've frozen this, and now I can just copy this, Command C or Control C, and then paste it in a new track. We should have, interesting. Not totally sure why that's not working, but Anyway, we could also just do like flatten here, and this should apply the effects to it. All right, so. Yeah, so I'm gonna axe this reverb and do something a bit more extreme to it, because I still don't think this is that interesting just yet. So let's add some like modulation. So I'm gonna add a chorus. And now we kind of get this like flanged out effect. We could push it really hard. And you can see here we can adjust the width and the amount. So let's render this out. And now we have our like flanged out kind of sound. Okay, so we have our R&B loop here going. Let's say I want to like maybe make this sort of like riser effect going into this before this comes in or something. I'll shorten this a bit. I'm going to reverse this sound, so you can right click, reverse clips, or you can just hit R. And then I'm going to put it through a reverb again. Oops. I'm not even going to mess with these settings too much. Maybe give it a long delay, long decay. Cool, so now we have this like long tail going. Again, I'm gonna freeze this out and flatten it so that we're just working with the audio. And then what if I reverse this again? So I'm like re-reversing the sound to get this like reverse reverb effect. So that sounds kind of like this. Classic riser effect. You could do this with vocals, you could do this with guitars. It kind of like always sounds great, to be honest. I love this effect. Okay, so I'm like lining this right up until the point when the sound comes in. And I'll increase the gain a bit more. And we can see it does like sort of fade up naturally, but we can also like work within the clip to like emphasize that a bit more. So just by dragging these points, now we have it come in a bit smoother. And then maybe I'd shorten it a bit too. Just before that like kind of like clicky percussion sound comes in. Cool. So now we've got like a riser going into our loop if we're like starting a new track here. Right? Classic effect. You hear it in popular music all the time. You hear it in film trailers. Make that drop fat, you know. Cool. So as we can see, I've kind of like completely transformed this room tone into something that's usable now with music. Maybe now I'll start working with a more melodic sample and see if I could get some interesting, more like ambience texture kind of thing. So, like I was saying, I always love to sample myself, and I think it's a great way to like push the boundaries of your own music. So let's just start with repitching this to something else. It's kind of nice, kind of like smooth and jazzy, you know? I'm pretty into it. I'm going to change the warp mode on the audio here, down in the bottom left, to complex so that it doesn't have that kind of like choppy effect where it's like picking up all the transients as much. It's a bit smoother as a repitch. So yeah. Let's see if we can make like an undertone or like kind of like start layering this. Yeah, layering is like a really key thing with designing your own sounds. It's how you add depth and fullness and richness to something. It's also like what makes engineers, particularly in today with electronic music, hip hop, R&B, I mean indie and rock as well too. Often like you'll hear like a kick that sounds like huge, and maybe actually it's like a recorded kick, like it's a live drummer, but then they've also added in like samples over that kick and sort of like blended them together to make it more of a like just like poke out more in your mix, or just sound like bigger. It's really common. But you can do this with anything. So I'm gonna do it with this melody. I'm kind of curious like how far I can push this. So let's say I want to make like an ambient layer to this. I'm going to create a new audio track. I'll just title it. Also in Ableton, if you're retitling something, like so you hit like Command R to like retitle your track. Delete, and then if you put a hashtag, it'll like automatically number it, which is always nice if you don't feel like naming everything to have track numbers as it starts to get messy. Being organized is always nice in music production, in my opinion. Yeah, so let's start pushing this a little further. So I'll add a filter to this. Kind of like muffling it out a bit. It's warmer. And then I will, yeah, let's just do that and see what happens. I'll add some like of this. This is an LFO. Like this is just like a simple filter called auto filter in Ableton. But you could adjust like, you can add like an envelope to it. So if you want it to be a bit more like funky or something. And then the LFO amount will kind of like move the frequency up and down on its own. So you kind of can add this like randomness, or like take your hands off the wheel a bit, which I'm a big fan of doing because I think it adds like interesting, it adds some like interesting elements when you sort of like let go and everything's not like super quantized or tied to the grid. So I'm just gonna like let the LFO do its thing here, and then I'll duplicate this a couple times so we have a little bit longer of a loop. If I select my clips and press Command L, or if I go up here, this is loop, it'll just automatically adjust to be a longer loop. And so yeah, we've got it moving a bit now. Maybe I want to add some delay. I'll just add a simple delay. Here we have, can like offset it. So I was talking before about how each of these like color, dynamic, space, pitch, stereo image, they're all sort of like interrelated. Maybe I want to make this loop wider. So I added this delay, and then I've offset the left and right a tiny bit on each. And it's gonna just make it sound wider. Here we have like this like little infinity sign. It'll like grab on to like whatever is like feeding back right now, and then just repeat it. So you can hear this if I turn the dry wet all the way up, so we're not hearing the dry signal at all. right? Now we have this like repeating going on. Cool, so I kind of like where that note is hitting. So as it's looping, I'm actually just going to record this. Sorry. So in my new track where it says external in or ext in, I'll change this, my input, to be resampling. And what this is doing, it means the track is just going to take the signal from whatever's going through the master and then record it. Like, for example, if I had all my sounds playing at once, it would record all of them. But if I just solo this out, it'll start recording it. Gotta arm the track, which I forgot to do. You can see it's recording here. And then what I like to do is just start to experiment to get some like cool moments. So I'll take this off. Let's just like play with the filter a bit. Push the feedback really hard or something. So what we just did is we recorded that like normally you could do that with automation. In Ableton you would hit A and then you could like draw in, like say you wanted to draw in like the feedback going up and then cutting off really hard. That would sound like this. Right? But I like to print things and work with audio, like I was saying, because now all these like little weird things that happened where I was just like moving knobs around, they're all recorded in and we could like use them as their each individual component. So let's listen back to this real quick and see what happened. So that's kind of cool. So I'll cut that, Command E, or you can hit right click and then split. So, and I can also change the color. So if I just wanted to like see this a bit better, I could like change it to like green or something. And then I know this is like its own thing. So let's say this is like its own moment. I don't really care too much about what happened here. So now we have like two new sounds coming out of this loop we were working with. And then we can push those further and or layer them. I guess that's what we were doing. We're gonna layer them against this to like kind of increase the depth of it. So let's listen to this. Oh yeah, and I'll turn off my effects I have going on it right now too. Go back to the original. We can hear what I just did over that. Kind of conflicting right now, but let's say I pitch it down 7 semitones. Kind of an interesting ambience. I'll turn off warping so that it stretches it longer to give some like interesting rhythmic variation. Cool, and then I'll do something a bit more extreme here. So Ableton also has like plugins that aren't just your basic reverb delay and stuff. If you go under like modulators, we can add an LFO. So that could like be used to, for example, modulate any effect on any plugin in Ableton. Like if I wanted to like assign this to the filter of the delay. You can see now it's going to move back and forth. Oh, sorry, I got the wrong thing soloed here. So that's one example. If we go to reverb and resonances, we got some more crazy stuff in here like spectral resonator. Sorry, I'm in the wrong track here. So I want to put this on 3. And this is going to like kind of like synthesize a frequency or a note based on the incoming signal. So here's our dry signal. And then this is what it's synthesizing, right? So let's hear this over it. Turn this down a bit. And then I could like turn on this where it's a musical note, and it's going to tell me the pitch value of it in hertz, or its frequency. So then I could just kind of like play this by ear until it's in key. We could adjust the decay so it's a bit longer as well. Unison, like on a synthesizer, unison is like multiplying the oscillators and detuning them each slightly, which kind of gives you that like super, like you hear it a lot in like old trance music, but also it's like similar to like a chorus effect, I'd say. So like let's put unison up to like 3 and the amount down a bit. Now we can hear this is kind of like sounding like some weird drony, throaty kind of instrument. I'll move this out for a sec, and then again, freeze, flatten, because I like no looking back, you know? It leads you to more interesting places, I think. So, okay, so like, let's make this. So I'm just going to adjust the length of it really quick. And then maybe I want to pitch it down once again. Now we got some pretty deep bass coming from this, you know, coming from this like little guitar melody. Yeah. If I wanted to make it, you know, hit a bit more on the transient, I could like shorten it like that. And then maybe I want to make this more of a like a bass hit versus this like drone that kind of has no attack to it. I could go in and like layer this with another sound. So I'm gonna go into samples, and these are like all the samples in all of your projects and what comes with Ableton. I'll just search up here kick. I don't really know what I'm gonna pull out yet. And then you can preview them. Right, maybe I want more of like something kind of thick. That's kind of nice. Alien fash. All right. So I'm going to line that up under this. And then now I want to try and like meld them together so that they're one sound versus like 2 distinct sounds. There are a few ways you can do this. Like I would usually start with EQ. So maybe I'll do that. Let's add a little EQ to this kick. I don't think I need all this like high-end crispy stuff. Just a nice thud. And then maybe I want to clean up the low end a bit too, so that the bass has some room. What I can do now is I could group these tracks together and then apply processing to both of them at the same time. So if I hit Command G, or if I like select both of them and right click, I could do group tracks. And what this means now is that both of these are being sent to a group, which is then being sent to our master channel. And we could apply effects to the group. So maybe I start by compressing them together. So I'll go to dynamics. I like glue compressor. This is like a nice kind of like analog emulation that comes with Ableton. And then I'll just like lower the threshold until it's doing something. We've got about like 9 dB of reduction. So then I'll add that to my makeup gain. And then maybe I want to push the attack up and lower the release so it's a bit more like punchy. And soft clipping is it's like introduces like more like natural harmonic distortion, like based on hardware, I think. You can turn that on. So they're not quite gelled just yet. I think we need something a bit more extreme. So let's do, what should we do here? Why don't we add, drum bus is kind of cool. This is like a transient designer, a transient shaper. So it's sort of like a saturator mixed with a compressor and maybe something else I'm missing, but this is adding like quite a bit of gain to my thing, so I'm just going to lower the output a bit here on the right. And then where it says frequency, if I hit my little headphones I can hear. What it's doing is going to boost the frequency of the sound quite a lot, so I don't know if you'll be able to hear this because we're on Zoom, but the decay is like the length of this like kind of like bass subby undertone it's adding. Clipping, sorry about that. Turn that down a bit. And then transient, it's going to like adjust the attack of the sound. Crunch, it's like distortion. It's getting kind of cooler. So let's see where we're at. If we move these over right here, let's see how our piece is coming together. And I'll like push this. I'll fade this in a bit more to like emphasize this hit. Sorry, I muted this. It's pretty nice. Okay, so this is almost like a bass I could work with if I wanted to make like a bass line or add like a kick, kind of like a subby kick. So I'll go ahead and like resample this. Oops. Resample this track. I've got the group that I just worked with soloed. Cool. And then yeah, so we've got this kind of nice like clipped subby dark bass. And then we could like, this will be pretty simple, but I'll just put another one here and then like pitch it up. Right. And then maybe it's becoming more of a bass line now. I'll repitch this as well. It's not perfect, but it's kind of interesting that we just got like a bass and we didn't even touch a synthesizer or a sample. Um, cool. What else? What else should we go through here? I guess I'll ask real quick if anyone has any questions, maybe. Um,
None that I can see, but I'm just really enjoying. I'm really loving seeing all of your little tricks too. Like the way that um, anyway, just your approach is really interesting to have be a
well, thank
fly
you.
on the wall for.
Cool. How are we doing on time, by the way? Just so I don't get too carried away with
We're about
tunneling down anything.
55 minutes in, so however long you want to go is fine. But
Cool.
yeah,
So yeah, I'll show a couple more things real quick.
okay.
Um, oh yeah, so I didn't touch these samples I dropped in over here. I had this like percussion loop and kick going. More like future garage vibe. So let's just drag this over. And see how this clicks together, right? Like this I haven't changed it all yet, but it's from another song, but like maybe it works better with this one, you know? Let's see. I'll unmute them. Lower this bass down a bit. Oops, sorry. So if I wanted to, I could like work with these a bit as well. Maybe add one more element before we wrap up here. Let's try out. So I'll show a cool effect here at the end. Corpus. So this is like a resonator, and it's like it's called like acoustic modeling. So it's kind of as if like you inserted what I'm doing right now. It's like kind of as if I inserted this whole drum loop into like a pipe or a tube, or like it's emulating like the what's it called, like the hole in a guitar that like resonates and makes the sound happen. That was a pretty atrocious description of it, but I think you guys can know what I mean. So let's hear how this works on it. A dry sound. Adjust the tuning. So I'll like unmute my melody for reference, and I can like make it match up. So this is kind of crazy right now, but and then let's say like I make this loop double the length, so it's like half time, and then I'll adjust the transient serve here so that it's not so stuttery. I mean, kind of robotic, but could be interesting. Again, I'm gonna freeze and flatten. Oh, didn't work out. Let's try again. Try repitching it. And I'll just keep like kind of improvising and experimenting with sounds, like I was saying before, just generally until like it sounds right, you know. Sometimes it doesn't always work. That's fine. But that's what sound design is all about. It's like knowing your tools and knowing different methods in which you could like push something, or hearing that potential in a sample or a sound you're working with. and then just trying to make it fit in and glue together. Unwarp this, so I just like undid the thing I did, but since I did it after the fact of flattening or rendering out the audio, it'll have like a different effect. And let's reverse it too. And then maybe I want to add like an auto pan. This is a great plugin. So what I'll do, actually, I'll add a ton of reverb to this real quick to like fill out the space because it's a little bit choppy right now, right? Let's do like a quick like plate reverb, and then I'll EQ it real quick to remove a bit of that nasaliness. All right, and then give it a huge tail. And then auto pan. Sorry, my webcam's like blocking my view a bit. Auto pan allows us to like, as the name implies, just sort of like it'll pan between your left and right speaker. Again, I think maybe this is being output in mono, so maybe that's not immediately evident. But what we can do is we can adjust the phase that is essentially like a tremolo. So if the phase is at 0, it's just modulating a mono signal. And then we could adjust the rate to be like interesting rhythmically. Maybe I kind of just want to give it like a quick like stutter effect. So like let's do this like in 16th notes or something. Cool. And so now we have like enough stuff to like kind of start building out a track if we wanted to. Maybe I want to like have this sort of like be a wavy sort of effect and like more textural. So I'm fading in and out the sound. Let's hear it all together. Yeah, and so an hour is not exactly enough for me to flesh out a full track, but you guys can see like working with just a variety of source material, we can like just push it to its limits and run into these like happy accidents or just create these like interesting new textures and sounds that you just don't get from browsing through Splice or some sample library necessarily. I think everyone would have like a different approach to doing this, which is cool, and that's kind of why I think like sound design can just give you that edge as a producer or as a musician, where you're coming at it from a different approach, where it's not strictly compositional or thinking of like harmony or melody or rhythm. Yeah, maybe we can wrap it up there. I'm probably a bit over an hour now. But if anyone has any questions in the chat or something, I'm happy to go through those and answer them real quick.
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, like you're going over over these sounds, quite a lot. Like, I mean, as in something. Whenever I'm trying to mix or something, I reach this point where I can't even hear. I don't even know what my goal is or what I'm hearing. Do you have any like strategies for staying in the flow or keeping on working when or in hearing what you're actually doing?
Totally, yeah.
That's
That's.
weird.
I mean, I definitely can relate to that. Like, if you're mixing something and you're on like hour 36 of a 3 minute song, and it's just not hitting the way you want. Um, I think that like doing these like weird sound design like manipulations can kind of give you that X factor where suddenly you're like, okay, shit, man, I can't get this like snare to like hit where I want it to, or it's just not like gluing, it's not sitting right. Um, Maybe like repitching it and introducing a layer, suddenly it pokes out like over everything in this way that's nice, right? Or like unexpected. And like I was showing earlier with like the LFOs and like kind of adding these like I was saying like hands off the wheel like modulations, like it always like kind of can add this like element of surprise, I think, to a mix. Like yeah, I don't know, like I like if you listen to like modern pop music and R&B, like the vocal production is so it's almost like it's entire well it is actually like an entire mixing process in its own. Often like you might have a mix engineer and you might have a vocal mix engineer, right? um and like there can be so many layers and effects on the vocals, whereas even though you're just hearing like a lead vocal, it's occupying so much space and it's ducking and it's flanging a bit, and there's like delay that's filtered a bit to fill out the space when the singer is not singing. And keep things just sounding like interesting, uh like I was saying at the beginning, it kind of like I feel like it can add this like element of immersion where like you can break from these like traditional structures or recording where like you can turn like a super clean great recording into something that sounds like dirty out of the blue and break from it, or add that kind of like intrigue to your song, I think. I don't know, maybe that helps.
Oh, totally.
But
And another question that like you said at a certain point that you could build a track out of this, or you could start building a track out of that. How do you reach that point? How do you know that um, the elements that you've constructed uh, are you know it's enough to make something else?
right. That's a good question. I think once I start, like, I tend to just like produce until it's almost overproduced. Even like I just have like almost too much to work with, right? And like it's really busy. And if you think about the spectrum, like if we look at EQ on the master fader, it's really full. Like we have like our bass, our low mids, our mids, and our highs, like kind of like all really well covered. But maybe like it's almost too busy. And then I'll start like working backwards and start subtracting things. Um, like I may do a full session like this where I'm just like designing sound for an hour over something, and then I'll use like one element out of it. But I would have never got to that sound had I not created like five other sounds. You know what I mean? So yeah, like knowing when it's ready to become a track or something. I think just keep my advice is just keep adding detail, keep adding more and more and more, and then work backwards and see like what's too much, what's working, what's not working. Did you deviate too much from the original structure? Did you like overcomplicate things where like maybe like it's good in a more minimal sense, but then just this like one reverb tail that's like sucking up into like when the vocal comes in, is just that kind of like factor that makes it like pop.
Hmm. Yeah, I love how music production now is more like it's often more sculptural. Like because
Totally,
you are
yeah.
taking like you're taking this chunk of stuff and then you're just kind of actively removing it or like changing it in some way.
Yeah, totally. You really are like that's a good way to think of it. I think like is you're sculpting something when you're producing, especially when you're producing from scratch, and you're just like trying to create your own samples, or even if you're like working with other samples you found online, or sampling someone else's music. Yeah, I think it is really like a you're working like kind of like not you're not working like physically with the sound obviously, but you were kind of working with it like quite literally.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I, I mean, how, generally, how did you get into this? Like, how did you start working on this? Was it just, something you picked up one day, or that, and said, said, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, well, I went to school in electroacoustics like five years ago or something, and I feel like that was like a really like acousmatic, kind of like more academic sound art kind of a focus and approach to creating music. And that's not really the music I create. I make more like ambient music on my own. I make like dance music with other producers. I also work on like pop productions as like an engineer and producer, co-producer and stuff. But yeah, eventually when I started working in film as a sound designer, just working on like smaller films and gradually doing more and more. Um, yeah, I quickly realized that all of the techniques and tools for which I would like use to build like a sound effect, right? Um, like were just the same tools and techniques I was using to make music. Um, and yeah, that's why I think also like I was talking about this a bit in the beginning, but like I think sound design is like really thrown around. Like I'm not saying this in a negative way, but it's really like thrown around a lot as a term that could mean like so many things. Like people talk about being a sound designer when they're just like really an adept at like programming synthesizers, you know. And it's true, you are designing a sound, but um, yeah, I think like modern production, mixing, sound design, all of it's so interrelated or so blurred at this point, which I think is really cool. It's kind of like I think it increases like the accessibility of doing this as an art practice, but also just like leads to interesting new results.
Yeah, it's like endlessly, there's so much possible.
Totally, yeah.
Which
Possibilities
is
are indeed
overwhelming,
endless.
right? Like,
Y-
do you ever get overwhelmed by it, or just don't know where to start on something, or?
Um, yeah, for sure. I think starting something from scratch is like always the hardest.
Mm.
Like sometimes, yeah, you wake up and like it's just that good day where everything you're doing just hits right, or it's clicking and it's coming together. Um, but uh, yeah, I think that's kind of why I like just pulling like even like an old song and just dropping it into the timeline over like a drum loop I created. I'm like, I can't write a melody right now to this. It's working, but throw the old song and then just start turning those knobs and start throwing on effects and seeing what happens, and then suddenly you're somewhere interesting,
Hmm.
and you don't even need to know where you're going. You know,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's nice to be able to let that go.
totally.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? I feel like um, this has been really special. I think. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a huge pleasure. Anything else to add? Not really. I work with a nonprofit digital arts org called World Creation Studio in Montreal. We also do some workshops, and if you're in Montreal, we'd love for you to come by and say what's up. We have artist residencies and music studios that we rent out. It's if this sort of workshop interests you, there's lots more that I'm doing with this kind of thing. You can also my personal project is Opera, like Opera. If you want to search me up, check out my music sometime. That'd be always appreciated. But
Hit repeat
yeah,
and then
little
just leave the
plug at the
room.
end.
Yeah, press loop on. Apple Music is the one that actually pays people, I think, these days.
True, true. Yeah, Spotify, don't use it.
Yeah, don't use it. Um, Sarah, do you have any questions for Tatum, or any final words?
No, yeah, that was great. Thanks so much. I guess not sure if you mentioned already, but you can get like a 30-day free trial of Ableton Live, right?
Yeah, I did not mention that, but if you want, yeah, that's great. You get the full like suite, so there's like different versions of Ableton. But if you do the 30-day trial, you get the full version that comes with it comes with like Max for Live, which I don't think I touched on at all, but Max MSP is like an audio programming language, and it's really well integrated into Ableton. So there's lots of cool like patches people like develop, and you can like find them online for free or for really cheap. And they usually are just like way off the wall, like really niche stuff. Like if you're ever like, oh, like I didn't know I needed that, but now I do, and I can never work without it again. I find a lot of those.
I didn't know
That's
I
one cool
needed to
thing about it.
convert like gifts into, you know,
Yeah,
instruments.
exactly.
uh, yeah,
See?
awesome. Max is awesome. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, no, that was good. Just want people to know that you can get the free trial, basically.
Oh yeah, and Tatum, was a lot of those a lot of those plugins were they built in? Are they part of Ableton? I think it seems like you were using mostly
Yeah,
plugins.
so intentionally, I only wanted to show just like the built-in effects, rather than like show a bunch of different like plugins that might be more expensive or inaccessible. Like, I think like you could. That's one thing that's really cool about Ableton is like it has your basics like that come with every DAW, but it does have these more like niche, weird, like audio processing tools as well.
Hmm.
Um, and I also like that they're like quite visual. Like they show at the bottom, and you don't have to like open separate windows. You can see everything in the chain and like what the settings are on it. I always kind of appreciated that. But yeah, the built-in functionality of Ableton is extremely powerful. I treat Ableton as an instrument, honestly. I like think of it kind of like as one big like sampler or synthesizer, um,
Right.
when I work with audio within it.
Um, just because I think one person asked what one plugin was at one moment, I wondered if you'd be able to go through like all of the different plugins that you used, just quickly, just as a way of closing out the.
For sure. Like I was using EQ, delay, reverb. Maybe this one. This is drum bus. This is like a saturator transient designer. So it's really good if you have like a not punchy sound and you want to make it punchy. Um, Towards the end, I was showing. I think towards the end, I was showing like auto pan. I was showing spectral resonator. This one was pretty crazy.
Oh yes, yeah,
Um, there's all sorts of good stuff.
Apex area.
Yeah, Aphex Twin kind of mode.
Hmm.
Um, but there's so many I didn't even go through. Like there's great stuff like Redux. You can like it's like a bit crusher. Vinyl distortion is always great. Like it adds like kind of like the natural saturation and compression you would get from like pressing something to vinyl to a sound. Um, like which is often like really desirable. Yeah, so much great stuff. Shifter's cool. I don't think I showed this one, but this is a cool one. It's like a delay pitch shifter, kind of like built into one.
Oh wow,
Um,
delay pitch
yeah,
shifter. Jesus.
uh, Corpus. I think I showed as well.
Of
This is like
course,
a.
there's one of
This
those.
is the one that was like a resonator that like it's a like acoustic. It's like acoustic modeling. So it's like if you like pushed a sound from a loudspeaker through a plate and then like recorded it or something. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. Hopefully, whoever asked that question saw the one they needed. This will be posted online as well, so you can always go back and look through. So,
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again, Tatum. That's it. Enjoy your Sunday. Thank you so much.
yeah, thanks you as well. Thanks again for having me, guys. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. You know,
All right.
Um, yeah, we'll be back here again with another Lawnya Vawnya presented workshop on Sunday. We haven't announced it yet, but we'll be doing that shortly. um, but yeah, stay tuned and thanks again, and good luck to everybody working on projects for the RPM. Have fun.